sell your soul. Yes, I did. But I guess you didn't know. As I said, the story goes. Baby, now
Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Staying Connected podcast. Today we have George Sun, CEO of Nextiles, as our guest. Nextiles is a material science company working on the next generation of wearable technology. George studied electrical engineering at UC Berkeley and got his PhD in bioengineering at MIT with a focus on material science before starting Nextiles. How are you doing today, George?
Yeah, thanks for the intro and doing really, really well. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So as the introduction kind of showed, you've explored a lot of different fields so far in your life. So my first question is, why Nextiles?
Yeah, I think part of your introduction helps explain that question as I've been privileged to learn under many disciplines. I did electrical engineering, I did a bit of computer science. With my PhD in material science, I learned how to fuse some of that learning on electronics and smart devices and try to fuse that with garments, fabrics, and yarns. And I think Nextiles was more of a creation of a fantasy of, well, can we put all the intelligence you have on these hard objects, your phones, your computers, and then put them seamlessly around the body? Because for me, I think one of the most exquisite movements and things that we can analyze are human motion. And maybe to extend a bit of that intro that you gave for me was after my PhD, I was one of the engineers and designers at Puma. So I helped them build technologies and prototypes, and I saw how real adding circuitry into garments could be. And so Nextiles was a extension from that. So it was combining my PhD work, the stuff I did at Puma. I learned how to sew in New York in the garment district, and all this was just a natural convergence that led to Nextiles.
That's awesome. And so I know you've been working a lot with athletes recently. When you first started Nextiles up, was there a specific group or market in idea or in your mind rather, or was it kind of something that just has emerged over time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate it because what people don't know through all the successes we've had in sports and really the elite level of sports was Nextiles first started in physical therapy. One of my interests was really how to help and rehab those who are injured. So those with, let's say, healing from surgeries, those with ACL tears, even those on the geriatric side, can we measure those with limps or gait impairment? And so my fascination was really on data collection, was preventative care, was on rehab and monitoring. And it's interesting. I think people think of those ends as two opposite spectrums of those who are injured and those who are performing at the highest level. Those are two distinct groups, but they're really the same to me, as in, well, what can we do to maintain health and prevent the injuries? I say that because it wasn't that we went from physical therapy and we slowly went to sports. Sports was really related because the reason why we eventually shifted into the elite sports, the high, I guess the high achievers, was it was the natural way to learn how you can move. So basically, we were getting, I would say, gold level data from elite athletes, learning how they perform, using that data and trickling that down to say, well, if you don't perform in these ways, you could get injured. So it was more of like, how do you look at that coin? Do you look at it from the preventative side or from the I guess the consistency technique side? And we eventually adopted the technique consistency side, sorry, on the sports end.
That's awesome. I think it kind of relates to like a lot of research that's out there on whether it be motor learning or just on development of humans tends to be focused on injured populations or elderly populations or super young populations, but there's certainly a lot that we can learn, like you said, from the elite athlete group and how that relates to human movement, because that's almost like it's the best that we have as
Yes.
a species, I would say. And I think one thing I wanted to touch on or ask you about is the opportunity that Nexthouse has to measure movement in more, let's call them real environments, right? So I think one of
Mm,
the revolutionary things about your technology is that we don't need to be in a dark room to measure a person's movement. We can
mm.
measure them in their kind of natural ecology, let's call it. So how important do you think that is for helping us to understand these issues that you talked about?
Yeah, I another great point because one of the initiatives or things that we want to pioneer at Nextiles is a seamless and really unknown experience. As in, we actually don't want to be conspicuous. We want to be behind the scenes. We want something that you just wear naturally. We're non-intrusive. And you make a really great point that the current experience you have, whether you need to go to rehab, you need to go to a physical therapist, you need to go to that dark room with cameras and balls that are stuck to your body, it's very intrusive and it's very disruptive to the natural flow. So when we do this analysis, and I'm not saying that the current analysis is inadequate. What we do now is extremely good, and we get a lot of insight from it. But there is a degree of it's almost contrived. It's like, are you a good test taker or you're a good thinker? And we usually want to believe that we prefer good thinkers. You can think out of the box, but because you're being put in these really contrived scenarios, it's almost like you have to be a good test taker to really understand how you move. And people don't operate in those artificial settings. And so that being said, given that we are a garment and fabric-based technology, we want to get out of that dark room, get out of those contrived scenarios where, yes, go to a physical therapist, go to a coach, they'll train you, they'll teach you, they'll make it maybe educational and controlled. But with Nextiles technology, you can take that and then leave. Go to the backyard, go on a hike, go to a baseball field and do exercises without any kind of intrusiveness. And so I think given the freedom to really do any kind of motion you want and under any kind of lighting or circumstance with your by yourself or with a team, I think it'll just naturally the data, it's really weird to put data in a qualitative light, but the data will just look more natural. It'll be less, I would say, artificial, putting quotes around that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It almost be even like smoother potentially, right? Like we're not
Mm,
the way at least I understand it. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but you have the capability to have a better understanding of even like potentially where joints are in space and a wider range of versus
mhm.
having to measure like distance via like an electrical field or magnetic field, for example. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah, it definitely makes sense, and I want to follow up on that with the effects because I really believe the human body is probably one of the most complex machines anything has been made, natural or unnatural. And given that we're so complex, even for me who have studied this, I have a really hard time understanding the nuances between different motions and especially different motions of between different body types. I bet if we go running right now, Chase, we just run differently. It doesn't mean one's better than the other. You're probably faster, but we just have different techniques. And I think once we get out of a training or dark room, as you just said, and we just naturally go for runs and we naturally see who fatigues, who has a bigger stride, that all comes out of just freedom to move. And that's really the heart of Nextiles of do whatever movement you want, do it naturally, and we'll just I'm using naturally a lot, but we'll just naturally understand this is your biomechanics, rather than having you put a Iron Man suit and doing all these tests in a facility.
For sure, yeah. It seems like observing motion rather than imposing a motion on someone. I think that's a really nice
Yeah.
idea. Is there a like a favorite use case that you can share, or something that you've been like, wow, this is really what Nextiles is meant to be used for?
Yeah, I think I have a fun story, and this story is more humbling. Of obviously, as a scientist and as someone who likes to tinker and make things, yeah, one of my goals is to build an Iron Man suit, to build a suit, tuxedo, whatever you want to have, but build something that can do everything for you. And that was like the ideal use case for Nextiles is this companion armor, so be it, that could detect anything, your pulse rate, your temperature. But to be honest with you, after going through interviews, working with our clients and partners, I've been humbled that really the best thing we can do for our customers, for our users, is to record notes for them. And I'm going to try to elaborate on that. There is data collection, and we do that really well. We're collecting data, probably 1,000 data points per second, and we do a really good job in tracking the raw data, whether it's forces, acceleration, gyration. But I think what the field misses, or we tend to overlook, is all the metadata. The metadata being, well, when did you do this? Were you hungry when you did this? Did you do an exercise before this? Did you have enough sleep before this? What kind of activity are you doing this time? Did you do it consistently for the past 7 days? Who coached you? And it turns out metadata collection is a lot harder to tackle and to measure. And maybe just try to wrap this in a bow for Nextiles, because we're a very seamless technology, we're actively capturing all the metadata along with you. We actually know your size because it's fabric. We actually know where it is because you had to put it on that joint. It's not some sort of phone where you can put in either pocket or have it on the floor. Like we actually know it's on your left arm. You've been using it for the past 7 hours. You did these activities in the past 2 days to a week. And with all of that, we can gain more of a holistic picture of what you're doing today. So to go back to what's my favorite use case, yeah, I would love to do everything for you, but just being a very diligent note taker to say, okay, you've been doing this for this long. These are the activities you've been doing. And actually to use machine learning in hopefully a just way to machine learn and predict, okay, well, given the history of your movements, what are you most likely to do and not do? And is that what you want, right? Do you feel like you can do another 10 more reps? Do you feel like you could sustain another 2 hours? And we can do that just by looking at the history. And history has to be recorded. And for Nextiles, we do, I think, a really good job at recording not only just data, but the metadata.
Yeah, that's great. I think Nextiles is kind of looking at a systems level, movement at a systems level rather than at a joint level, and that makes a lot of sense. I think, especially with our understanding of how skills develop or how people develop, societies develop, even right. Like we cannot take people outside of their context, and we often try to do that. Do you feel like because of this that the goal ultimately will be to support people in like everyday activities as well? I'm not sure if I'm explaining this right, but basically, will you guys be like an assistant in some ways? And like you have typically, when you do this type of exercise, you typically have X repetitions left, or you get tired at X rate. I'm not sure if I'm.
Yeah, I think I'm getting it, and maybe I could extrapolate a bit of that maybe your analogy or your example is that to step back a little bit, what we're doing now is we're recording data from elite athletes. So uh, I I will sound kind of confident, but I'm going to say that I think we have a really good grasp of what a good pitch is. We've been studying baseball for about 2 years, probably even more, for things like arm velocity, torque. We have a pretty good grasp of what movement kinematics gives you a healthy throw and a throw that's also very powerful because we've been analyzing a lot of these athletes. To your point, what we're trying to do is take that note take and distinguish, okay, well, these throws are this kinematics is appropriate for this person of this height and this weight. This kinematics is appropriate for a different height, different weight, different arm length. And because we've taken such good notes on the metadata side of body types, biometrics, biomechanics, the kinematics of the data, we can then go to the consumer and then educate them. Because I'll be honest, I probably can't throw a baseball that well. However, though, if you can compare me to a body type that's similar to mine, maybe you can coach me in a more defined track. Because I was an athlete. I swam before, but I think one of the things that I realized as an ex-athlete was it not one size and one training method fits all. And I think that's obvious, but that's really hard to do. That means you need one coach per athlete, but that's not how it works. You have one coach for a team. So we're really here to be an assistant to the coach, to be an assistant in just taking those notes, data and metadata, and then categorizing that to then say, okay, for you as an individual, how do we cater a very personalized experience for you? And that comes down to data collection, machine learning, and just knowing that person over the history of their exercise. So I hope I'm not talking in circles, but to your example of how can this be used by a consumer, we're hoping that we can learn more from the consumer by learning similar people of that type. And we're doing that by going at the elite level and then trickling that down.
Yeah, so kind of along those lines, what do you see as the future of Nextiles? You kind of talked a little bit about learning from all the data that you're collecting to help in, let's call them similar cases or similar people, similar populations. But what specifically do you see as the future for the company?
Yeah, I right now I believe a lot of industries, connected performance is one of them. I'm really excited to have them as a partner. I think a lot of people see us as a hardware solution, and that's something that I'm proud of because that is that came out of birth from my experience in engineering, in textile engineering, actually learning how to sew. But at the end of the day, the future of Nextiles is to become a data company. That I love what I do. I love what I make. I wish my parents could use what I make, but at the end of the day, I don't care if another company makes what we do. We're happy to license our technology, whether it's being made by the Nikes of the world, the Lululemons of the world, as long as we can say that this garment is powered by Nextiles, much like most computers are powered by Intel. There's that quote Intel inside. I'm happy with whoever does it, as long as we share the data is accrued, and Nextiles is the hub where all that data gets accumulated and analyzed. So the future of Nextiles is let's really create a seamless and welcoming experience when it comes to sports. Like sport is already, I would say, there's a barrier to it. You have to have equipment. You need to have the motivation to do it. So to give you another barrier to be like, oh, let's wear another 10 pounds of a garment, that's not going to help you. So as long as we could be a seamless entry and a welcoming entry into what you're already doing in sports, I think just giving that data, uh, adding into the learning knowledge of human motion and mechanics, that's really where we want to be, is to be that hub where we can distribute knowledge and share data, which is exactly what we're doing with connected performance.
Kind of shifting gears a little bit to answer potentially questions that other people might have about the company side, the company building side of Nextiles. Question that I have is with regards to building a startup from scratch. If there's a moment that stands out as being particularly difficult for you, and kind of what you learned from it and how you overcame that moment.
Yes, give me a moment because that's more like an interview question of maybe one of the biggest challenges of my career. I think it comes from two ends, one external and one internal. So externally, it's more of definitely listening to the customers. I come from a different world. I primarily work in academics and science ideally is objective. Things are right, things are wrong, and ideally you do things the right way. Whereas humans, that's not so much. There's a lot of variables, there's a lot of factors. The right way may not be the best way. And so learning that from the customer perspective was very insightful. Some examples were just how to wear something. One of our flagship products is the arm sleeve, and it literally looks like a cylinder. It is a cylinder, and I just assumed you just put it on and you wear it. That's it. So it's a one-step process. That's not the case. People wrinkle it, people crump it, people don't even know when it stops. Some people just leave it on the elbow. Some people may even wear it in a different angle. And so to me, I think if I was a true scientist, I would say those who do it that way are wrong. Like those are user errors, those are customer errors. But I think now that's ridiculous. That's something that I needed to learn, that no, the user experience is wrong. How you've educated, how you've specified how to wear it. Maybe there was a lack of communication, a lack of instructions. Like that's the error. And so externally, it was a very humbling process to be in the shoes of the user and kind of having to eat my own medicine to say, well, if the goal of Nextiles is to have a seamless user experience, then let's not mess these things up, and let's follow the flow that's already built into the mental mind landscape of these customers. So it was mainly having to adopt practices, but also pushing back a little bit. So we re-educate a little bit. Like I still want to, I don't want to always conform, but I want to conform and also teach. And so that's one thing I learned the hard way externally. Internally was getting my team to understand sports. Not everyone coming in as an engineer has a sports background, and for us to understand the vocabulary, understand the demands, understand even the reason why we need to record these types of data. I don't think it was a challenge, but was more of a fun endeavor. It was like playing it was like Duolingo in a way. Just every day we're kind of learning new words. So not a challenge, but more of a growth experience for the company.
And George, what do you mind elaborating on that? Because I think you bring up a fantastic point, that, and that's something that I go through almost every single day, is that I've been fortunate enough to have Will as our CTO, who's actually a current athlete of ours. But as we grow and expand, it's been a huge hurdle of getting somebody to, I don't want to say think like a baseball player or think like an athlete, but have them understand the realm. And sometimes it's great because they have no idea what you're talking about and they can bring a completely different perspective to it. But other times I struggle with, hey, you just need to kind of understand the whole realm of baseball. So what do you mind just kind of drilling into that process a little bit more?
Yes, so there are two things that I had to teach, or maybe not so teach, but get acclimated with the team, was the user journey of an athlete. Like, what do they have to go through? And also the vocabulary, the vernacular that people have in sports. I believe the vocabulary and the vernacular, we just had to learn naturally. And this is where we were just proactive. We just got people on calls. I'm very happy for my partners, John Peters, as well as Matt Evans, who are more athletically inclined. That, they're the ones talking with customers, they're the ones bringing in coaches and athletes, and they've been open-minded enough to include my engineers on some of those calls. And a policy that we do as well is we actually write diaries. So every time we have a meeting with a coach or a client, we actually write a post, almost an internal blog post to say, okay, we talked to Coach A, they said these things. Person A on my team, take a note because we think this is relevant for your work. So just being proactive in communication within the team was helpful. In terms of the user journey, I hate to give you a bad answer, but it was pretty much like getting it wrong the first few times. We definitely got the user journey wrong, and we've been lucky that it wasn't detrimental to the company. But I do know that even simple things like logging on a user, because our users could either be a coach or an athlete, and sometimes the athlete is not cognizant, sometimes the coach is trying to manage 20 accounts. We really had to optimize our onboarding as well as how people select sessions. I know I'm going into the jargon, but even simple things like, well, are you going to do long tosses? Are you going to do plyo throws? Are you just warming up? So those types of things, the user journey, we really had to go through just by going on trips. We literally had field trips, talking to these athletes, or just mapping out scenarios and doing them ourselves to say, okay, let's simulate a training exercise for pitchers. We're not going to throw out 100 miles per hour, but let's just go through the exercise of putting a product on, wearing it, trying to select an activity, trying to show that data to a coach being me, and seeing how that goes. So we would we would really simulate how this thing would work in the real world. And I think a lot of startup people would call it like eating your own dog food. Like you're making food, but you should just eat it yourself to see how it tastes. And there were moments of like, oh crap, this took 20 minutes to do, and it shouldn't. And so that type of simulation was more of a brute force. It wasn't elegant. We just had to just do it ourselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually kind of reminds me of there's a book called The Design of Everyday Things, and it discusses how, for example, if a door is meant to be pushed, but people try to pull it, that is not the user's fault. That is the designer of the door's fault because it's giving a signal
Yeah.
that's supposed to be pulled and really is supposed to be pushed. And so, to your point of creating an experience for the user that caters to them and is intuitive to them, I think is really nice, especially thinking of and kind of a reminder that the product itself or the technology itself is not necessarily the finish line, but there's other steps to continue with and keep growing with to try to continue building the company. I think that's like really, really nice. It's a really nice idea.
Oh, I resonate with that. And going to the your prior question of like what's the future of Nextiles, like the product is actually just the beginning. Just making this thing is really the start. We really want to be part of that user journey, get to that data, and then to bring it back as more as an educational method back to the user. So definitely resonate with what you just said.
And then a question that we ask every single guest here, which is what, if there's any topics or ideas that you're excited to dive into in 2024, whether that be Nextiles or personally?
Maybe we can start with Nextiles. I think our roadmap right now is to possibly diversify our sports portfolio. We've worked with the NBA. We have a lot of data sets on jumps. We also build these force plates for athletes for, let's say, readiness monitoring. So we have basketball in one area. We have baseball. We're very deep into baseball. But it'll be nice to go back and revisit some of the sports we not left, but didn't put much time into just due to bandwidth or interest. So things like maybe running or soccer or volleyball or tennis would all be great candidates to see if we could make a very modular solution, because the one thing I like about our technology, it's plug and play as it should be. You can wear a sleeve for baseball, you can wear a sleeve for golf. It's really just the algorithms we need to tune. And I see that as an exercise in building out our software muscles to try to become that data hub, the data partner for other companies. So I think for Nextiles, that would be more of transitioning from make a really good product, but see how we can diversify the software. I think for me personally, let's see. Yeah, I think it's just really just growing the team and making sure that we all are on the same mission. And this is going to sound extremely cheesy. I think people are going to roll their eyes on this podcast, but to meet people like you guys, I really do believe that to be good in this industry is to be partners with those in those expert fields. As in, I will never be an expert in baseball, and I will never be an expert in any other sport. I think I could try my best to become that by partnering with those who have spent their years in mastering that field. So for me, it's meeting more partners, working with more industries, and learning from the best. So that being said, super happy to be on this podcast. Hopefully, this was informative.
Yeah. Thank you, George, for sharing your insights. I think there's a lot to take away for people from a wide variety of spectrums, whether they're into biomechanics or even just business and starting up a company. So yeah, thank you again for joining us, and thank you everyone for tuning in and staying connected.
Awesome. Thanks, Chase. Thanks, you guys.